Motherhood is a special bond between mother and child. But what happens when a mother chooses her lover over her children? Will this lead to a well-rounded, happy family, or is this a recipe for cold-blooded murder? It's the case of Diane Downs, right now on Love and Murder.
Hey lambs, welcome to a new episode of Love and Murder, the weekly true crime podcast discussing relationships gone terribly wrong, where our motto is, you're either someone's last love or their first murder. I'm your host Rick, and because of some very minor technical difficulties, Kai will not be joining us today, but nevertheless, it'll just be a very special one-on-one session with me and you lovely lambs. Our show discusses true crime cases told in the form of a story with mystery, suspense, and just a tiny bit of humor sprinkled on top to lighten up the mood. We never make jokes at the expense of the victims, as Kai says every episode. Be sure to subscribe to Love and Murder on whatever platform you're on, as well as give us a 5-star review right now so you don't forget. If you're new here, listen to the episode first, and then rate us. Also, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show. In today's episode, we're discussing a case of lies, horror, terror, and despicableness between a mother and her children. Firstly, though, I wanted to remind you to head on over to our exclusive group at patreon.com/loveandmurder. In our last bonus episode, I gave a story that Kai was too scared to join me with, so I told it myself. It was a true ghost story that happened to me when I was younger. To hear it fully and see why Kai was so afraid, go to www.patreon.com/loveandmurder and join at the $5 tier or above. I will tell you more about Patreon later on in the episode. Now, on to the show. Elizabeth Diane Fredrickson Downs was born August 7th, 1955, in Phoenix, Arizona, to parents Wesley Linden and Willadine Engel Fredrickson. According to Diane, she was molested by her father when she was 12 years old. As a student, she was smart, but she wasn't very popular. She wasn't allowed to wear clothes that were considered quote-unquote in fashion. So the other kids liked to make fun of her a lot, and they often called her ugly and other, mean nicknames. When she turned 14, her father let her enroll in a charm school. This is when she began becoming rebellious and simply answered only to Diane. She also cut her hair into a popular style and started dressing like the other kids. She went to Moon Valley High School, and the boys began to notice her. One boy in particular took notice of her, Stephen Downs. The two began a relationship and graduated together around 1973. However, Stephen joined the U.S. Navy shortly after graduation. Diane enrolled at the Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College in Orange County, California. That was a mouthful. She returned home to her parents a year later, having been kicked out of college due to quote-unquote promiscuity. Don't jump on us for saying that. That is what the reports all say. So because of that, it should go without saying she cheated on Stephen multiple times while he was in the Navy. This is a terrible, horrible, toxic start to a relationship. Steve should leave. Let's see what happens. In true Love and Murder fashion, I don't think this is going to go very well, but we'll see what happens. So Stephen and Diane eloped on November 13th, 1973. In 1974, their first child, Christy Ann, was born. Their second child, Cheryl Lynn, was born in 1976. Stephen then decided to have a vasectomy, but Diane still got pregnant a third time anyway. According to Johns Hopkins Medicine, in rare cases, the vas deferens may grow back together. This could cause an unwanted pregnancy. Instead of moving forward with the pregnancy, Diane had an abortion. In 1978, Diane moved with her kids to Mesa, Arizona. Her and Stephen worked at a mobile home manufacturing company where she had affairs with several co-workers. Due to one of those affairs, she became pregnant with her fourth child, Stephen Daniel Downs, in 1979. While Stephen accepted quote-unquote Danny, as he would be known by, like his own child, he did suspect that Danny was the result of an affair with one of Diane's co-workers, so he divorced Diane in 1980 And while Diane would attempt to reconcile with her husband, she was still having numerous affairs. The question that me and Kai have is, do you think that she's suffering from some kind of sexual addiction? Could that be a cause of her father molesting her when she was so young and she never got the help? We want you guys to let us know in the comments. Diane had very little income during this time. She attempted to become a surrogate mother for some extra money, but her first 2 attempts failed after she was unable to pass the psychiatric exams. That should tell us something, but let's keep reading on further and see what happens. Reportedly, the test suggested that she was both, quote, intelligent and psychotic. A 3rd try was successful, and she received an offer. And that kind of confused both of us, because if she couldn't pass the first 2 tests, what made the 3rd test so different? Maybe she learned how to change her answers or her way of thinking. Maybe she figured out to say what they wanted to hear. I guess we'll never know firsthand, but it is fun to speculate. So in 1981, Diane met a man by the name of Robert Nick Knickerbocker, which is an awesome last name. Nick was already in a marriage with children, but Diane instantly fell head over heels for him. She would detail this great romance to the extreme in her diary. Meanwhile, while she's writing in her diary about how great this guy is that she loves so much, her children were neglected and starving. Also, too, remember, she's currently serving as a surrogate mother, and Diane was now working for the United States Postal Office. Her children would rotate caregivers between her parents, Stephen, and Danny's father. It's kind of interesting that Danny's father watched all the kids. Even Christy was forced to take care of her younger siblings more often than not, which is a shame because that is a responsibility you should never put on a young child. Neighbors would often report that the children were not being taken care of when Diane was supposedly looking after them. On May 8th, 1982, Diane gave birth to a little girl who she named Jennifer as part of her service as a surrogate mother. After the birth, she relinquished all of her parental rights. In February 1983, she attempted surrogacy again for 3 days, but was unsuccessful. Now, we don't know for certain if it was because of her mental state or if the implementation of the process just didn't take. Tell us what you guys think. Her relationship with Nick was starting to crack under pressure. Nick ended their relationship because she constantly told him that he should leave his wife, and he felt suffocated. People, please, we beg you, do not have affairs. They ruin your life, they ruin their life, and they ruin the lives of the people around you. Don't do it. Diane moved to Oregon to try to move forward with her life. Now, some of you might think, isn't it pronounced Oregon? I don't know. If you live in Oregon, please let us know. On May 19th, 1983, Diane decided to try to up her parenting skills and took her kids on a trip down Old Mohawk Road in Springfield. A bit down the road, Diane said that she was stopped by a strange man who told her to get out of the car. She states that he tried to get into the car, but she was thinking about her kids in the back seat and fought him off. The man must have thought that this wasn't worth the trouble, and instead fired 4 shots and ran away. When Diane got her wits about her, she went to check on her kids only to find all 3 of them were shot. She felt a stinging in her left forearm and realized that she also was shot. She then jumped in her car and drove her kids as fast as she could, to the nearest hospital, Mackenzie Williamette Hospital. When she got there, she called out for help. When medical professionals got to her car, Cheryl was already dead. She was only 7 years old at the time. The doctors looked after the other children. According to ABC News, the surgeon, Steve Wilhite, I believe that's how it's pronounced, who was working on Christy, who was 8 at the time, said, "When I looked at Christy, I thought she was dead. Her pupils were dilated, her blood pressure was non-existent or very low. She was white, she was not breathing. I mean, she's so close to death, it's unbelievable." End quote. But although her blood pressure did drop even lower and she suffered a stroke, the doctor was able to revive her. Danny, who was 3 years old at the time, also survived, but was permanently paralyzed from the waist down. Due to the circumstances of what happened, police were called and took Diane's statement. They also spoke with medical professionals who were on the scene at the time she arrived. Doctors said that Diane was very calm when she arrived, too calm for the level of trauma that had just occurred. She also made comments that were completely inappropriate to the situation.
You know what time it is. Cliffhanger Kai's back to give you your weekly reminder to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And you know we will be grateful if you would leave us a 5-star review on the platform of your choice. Also, come on over and join us at our exclusive Lamb community at Patreon at www.patreon.com/loveandmurder. Once you become a subscriber, you get access to commercial-free episodes so you don't have to hear this interruption ever again. Crazy Crime Corner, Love Obsessions, Serial Killer Corner, getting to know the hosts behind the scene, true crime games, and so much more. We have so much fun over there, so come on and join us, starting at only $1 a month. But our most popular tier is the No Murder tier at only $5 a month. Don't miss out, www.patreon.com/loveandmurder. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, we'll give you 5 seconds to subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes over there. You know how much we like the fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now, back to the show.
So I'm assuming that, while her kids are in danger and need medical attention, maybe she's talking about something else or trying to have casual conversations. When Diane came to visit Christy, who couldn't speak because of her stroke, Christy's eyes showed fear and her heart rate went up immediately. Also, as soon as Diane got to the hospital, she called Nick. Why? He's all the way back in Arizona and they're not even together, so her calling him doesn't make any sense to me. How about you guys? This made police suspicious, and they began investigating. The first thing they noticed was that there was no gunpowder residue on the driver's panel, nor was there any blood spatter on the driver's side of the car, which included the seat. When they went and searched her house, they found unused casings for a .22 caliber handgun. They also found letters, pictures, and diary entries, all talking about some guy named Nick, the same guy she called when she went to visit her daughter. Police went to visit this random Nick guy to see why Diane had called him at the hospital and why she had so much information talking about him. They found out that not too long ago, they'd been having an affair, as we discussed previously. Nick also told them that Diane had stalked him and expressed being willing to kill his wife so that they could be together. He also told them that she owned a .22 caliber handgun, which they confirmed with Steven. This is something that Diane didn't tell them. They realized that instead of moving on with her life when she moved to Oregon, again, please let me know how it's supposed to be said, Diane had continued obsessing over her and Nick's relationship. They also realized, due to the diary entries, that she was convinced Nick ended things because he wasn't interested and being like a stepfather to her children. She believed he broke off their relationship because of her kids. I always tell you guys to keep as much evidence as possible on you if you're going to do the crime. I think Kai agrees with me all the time about that. If you can put a note in your own handwriting admitting that you did the crime, just do that. Make it easy for everybody. Finally, the nail in the coffin was that when officers interviewed witnesses who were on the road leading up to the hospital, they said Diane's car was going between 5 to 7 miles per hour or 8 to 11 kilometers per hour instead of the crazy, ridiculous, ludicrous speeds that Diane claimed she was going. So it sounds to me like she wasn't in a hurry to save her kids. Hospital personnel said she arrived at the ER at 10:48 p.m. screaming, quote, "Somebody just shot my kids," end quote. Upon further investigation, police found out that before she took her kids on that drive, she was at someone's house named Heather Plord. She left her house at 9:45 p.m. Based on Diane's claim to the police, it was deduced that the shooting happened around 10:15 p.m. However, a witness informed them that they saw Diane's car, a red Nissan, around 10:28 p.m. driving very slowly down Old Mohawk Road. Because of all this undeniable evidence, Diane was arrested on February 28, 1984, about 9 months after the incident. She was actually arrested while coming out of her car in the parking lot of her job. She was charged with 1 count of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder and criminal assault. The trial started on May 10th, 1984, in Eugene at the Lane County Courthouse with a jury of 9 women. During her trial, Diane pled, what do you think, not guilty, and maintained her story of the mysterious man on the road. On the other hand, the prosecution argued that Diane shot her children so that she could get Nick back. Then she shot herself in the arm to make it look like a carjacking. Witnesses included the hospital staff. One nurse, Rose Martin, talked about one time when Diane came in to see the children. Quote, she asked how the children were, and I told her the doctors were in there working on them. And then she, the mother, laughed and said, only the best for my kids. And she laughed again and said, well, I have good insurance. End quote. One of the doctors, Dr. John Mackey, described the wounds to the children's chest and how the staff worked to save them throughout the night. She also discussed his observations of Diane that night, saying, quote, she was extremely composed. She was unbelievably composed. I couldn't believe that she was a family member. There were no tears, no disbelief. The x-ray technician, Carlene Elbridge, testified how Diane was more worried about her looks than her children. When she'd come to the hospital, she complained to the staff about coming out of the house without makeup. Christy, who could finally speak at this time, told a counselor, Paula Krogdal, how her mother parked the car, shot all 3 children, and then shot herself in the arm. What better testimony could you have gotten? With her treatment, and to not re-traumatize the child, Paula took a long time before she brought up the subject of the murder. She instead started out with how family life was for Christy. Christy said that her mother used to hit her and her siblings a lot. The first time Paula finally asked her about, as Christy called it, quote, that terrible thing, the session went something like this. Paula asked, was there anyone there that night that you didn't know? And Christy responded, no. Were Danny and Cheryl crying? No. Why wasn't Cheryl crying? Christy's response was just the word, dead. Do you know who was shooting? Christy's answer was, I think. She trailed off, and then she stopped. She couldn't get herself to say the words. But later on, she was able to admit that it was her mother. During the trial, attorney Fred Hughey was the one in charge of cross-examining Christy. He ensured that she felt safe, handed her Kleenex when she needed it, and showed a super amount of patience with her. He started out questioning gently, and by asking about her life and her family. When he got to the heart of the questioning, he still kept it as gentle as possible. He began talking about the day of the crime, starting with them being at Heather's house. He then got to the shooting. Christy said, she leaned over to the back seat and shot Danny. And then the attorney said, what happened then? What happened after Danny got shot? Christy started crying, so attorney Hughey patted her shoulder and gave her time to compose herself. And then he asked, do you remember when you got shot? She said yes. So he asked, who shot you? And her response was, my mom. There you go, folks. It's all out in the open now. So, as you can probably tell, Diane was convicted unanimously of all charges on June 17, 1984. She was found guilty of attempted murder in the first degree, a second account of attempted murder in the first degree, a first-degree assault, and guilty of another count of first-degree assault. Around this time, Oregon didn't have the death sentence, so the judge sentenced her to life in prison with an additional 50 years. Quote, the court hopes the defendant will never again be free. I've come as close to that as possible. End quote. She was required to serve 25 years before being eligible for parole. Diane was sent to the Oregon Women's Correctional Center. Psychiatric tests done on Diane at this time ruled her to be narcissistic and histrionic. According to Psychology Today, a histrionic personality is characterized by constant attention-seeking, emotional overreaction, and seductive behavior. People with this condition tend to over-dramatize situations, which may impair relationships and lead to depression. Yet they are highly suggestible, easily susceptible to the influence of others. It was also labeled as a deviant sociopath with antisocial personality disorders. At the time of her arrest, she was pregnant with a 5th child. Diane named this child Amy Elizabeth. The father didn't want anything to do with Diane or the child, so Amy was adopted by Chris and Jackie Babcock, who renamed her Rebecca. Later on, some jury members would state that they thought she had become pregnant to seek sympathy from them. It did not work. That sounds like something that this kind of person would do. Just have a kid so people feel bad for you. On July 8th, 1987, Diane escaped the correctional center by scaling an 18-foot razor wire fence. A 14-state manhunt led to her recapture 10 days later, when she was found in Salem, Oregon. She was then transferred to the Clinton Correctional Institution in New Jersey, now called the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women, which is a high maximum security prison. She also received an additional 5 years to her sentence. District Attorney Fred Hughey had actually adopted Christy and Danny after Diane's imprisonment. He lobbied for her to be moved to New Jersey because of the fact that his home was nearby to the Oregon facility, and that Diane could potentially invade his home trying to see her kids. State officials agreed with this and had her moved, even though security measures at the correctional site had already been improved. Diane was transferred again in 1994 to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. During this period, she graduated with an associate's degree in general studies. During Diane's first parole hearing on December 9, 2008, she continued to persist that she was innocent. She said, quote, "Over the years, I have told you and the rest of the family that a man shot me and my children. I have never changed my story." End quote. Lane County DA Douglas Harselroad wrote in response, quote, "Downs continues to fail to demonstrate any honest insight into her criminal behavior. Even after her convictions, she continues to fabricate new versions of events under which the crimes occurred. She alternately refers to her assailants as a bushy-haired stranger, two men wearing ski masks, or drug dealers and corrupt law officials." End quote. Diane was questioned by the parole board for 3 hours before being denied parole. She would go on to be denied again in 2010 and in 2022. According to the website Heavy, crime author Ann Rule wrote on her website, which is no longer active, quote, "Christy and Danny, who somehow survived their gunshot wounds, have no contact with Diane. They have both graduated from college. Christy is married and had a baby boy in 2005. Danny is a computer whiz, is still partially paralyzed from the bullet in his back, but he is living a happy and normal life. They have grown up in a very happy home with the Hughes. Christy was left with a speech handicap, but still persevered and went to the University of Oregon. After having her baby boy and getting married, she had a daughter who she named Cheryl after her late sister. As of this recording, she's 48 years old. Not much is known about the current whereabouts of Danny. Rebecca, the adopted child, tricked a babysitter into telling her who her real parents were, and that's why, at 11 years old, she found out who her real mother was. A few years later, she saw a documentary about her mother, and it devastated her. After that, she became depressed, and her life took a downward spiral. At some point, she started writing to Diane, but later decided against it and asked Diane to stop writing her. She appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show in her adult life and regarded her mother as a monster. She currently works as a behavioral health coordinator for children. You can check out a book by Ann Rule called Small Sacrifices. That's where we got some of our information for the research today. And that, my lovely lambs, is the case of the depraved Diane Downs. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below, or head on over to our website and shoot us an SOS or new shoutout system where you can send us a voice recording comment on www.murderandlove.com. If you like this episode, then head on over to Apple Podcast or Spotify and rate us 5 stars. You can also download Good Pods and rate us on there as well. You can say whatever you want in the description, but it helps bring us up in the charts so others can find us just like you did. Don't forget to visit us on Patreon to become an exclusive member of the LAM community. You get commercial-free, full-length, early release episodes of Love and Murder, as well as some extras of whatever case we're covering. You also get bonus content, like cases about love obsessions, or cases with the craziest crimes, or Serial Killer Corner. You also get host stories, behind the scenes, and so much more. We have options that start as low as $1 a month, but to get the most bang for your buck, join at the $5 or above tiers. Kai and I have a lot of fun over there, so please come on over and join us. Follow us on social media at facebook.com/relationshipcrime, Instagram at Love Murder Podcast. Join our Facebook fan group by searching Love and Murder fan page in Google or Facebook, or by simply clicking the link in the show notes. find our awesome merch by going to our website, www.murderandlove.com, and clicking our shop in the menu above. And an easy and free way, as Kai always says, to help us out is by simply sharing this episode. And as always, we remind each and every one of you to lock your doors at night. What was that? Oh, right. I'm being told by the director, Kai left a note. Let me see what it says here. All right. We also have to remind you, it's all love and no murder. Bye, everybody.